Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. We're continuing the series on why I use the different steels that I do. We did the one on 440C stainless, that was the first one. I just shot the one on 1095 high carbon steel, and then now we are going to go 5160. 5160 is the classic rough use steel as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I know a lot of guys now are using can't remember what the name of it is. I know my buddy James Helm uses a lot of it. Of course, he makes, you know, almost exclusively big rough use type of knives. 80 CRV2. I guess that's the steel that has kind of you know, replaced 5160 in a lot of hard use knives. So when I started off as a knife maker, I started off just like everybody else making regular hunting knives. So 4, 5, maybe 6-inch blade hunting knives, right? After that, or once I got kind of a good, you know, handle on making hunting knives the way I wanted them to, then I started making choppers. At the time, I was doing an awful lot of property maintenance, so clearing overgrown yards and you know, stuff like that. And so I was making a lot of choppers. This one right here, this is my shop chopper. It's either made out of, I think it's made out of 5160. I never did mark it, and this knife has been with me for a long time. But it is a thick, heavy, big convex grind, a heavy convex grind on it, full tang. I mean, 10-inch blade-ish, somewhere around there. Thing probably weighs 1.5 pounds, if not a little bit more. This thing will flat out plow through a 2x4. It works really good trimming trees. I used to keep this around as a head lopper for, you know, when I, you know, because I hunt, so I bring deer and antelope, and elk you usually bring home in pieces, but deer and antelope you usually bring home whole. And so I'd hang them, and then I'd use this to, you know, to lop their heads off with before I'd skin them. Nowadays, typically, I just go ahead and use the boning knife that I'm gonna skin them and work them up with. But this is a heck of a fine, big chopping blade. I don't really make a whole lot of choppers anymore, but when I do, 5160 is my steel of choice. Also swords. I've only made a couple of swords, maybe a dozen of them or so, something like that. This one was my my kind of first try at a Gladius. It came out pretty nice, I guess. I mean, there's not really a whole lot of way to test something like this. I did get the handles a little bit clumsy, and it's a little bit too long. But I suppose it would work if I ever needed something that needed Gladius. And then hard use knives. This one right here is my my bibs knife. Well, one of them. Carhartt bibs, you know, insulated and uninsulated. They used to have a diagonal pocket right here on the side. And so this goes into a sheath that fits down inside that pocket. And so it's edge forward, and it just sits right there on your hip. When you're doing an awful lot of cold weather work, you know, especially plumbing or any kind of outdoor type work like that, you know, these bibs knives work amazing. This one right here, man, it is, well, so it used to be, the edge used to be about there. Okay, so I've ground off at least 1/4 inch off of this blade just through sheer use of it. Tried splitting the handle by beating on the butt cap, trying to go through something, so I ended up wrapping it with copper wire and soldering it so that it wouldn't go anywhere. I've cut bolts with this thing. I've chipped through a foot of ice to get to a frozen shutoff valve with it. We've cut miles of insulation, pried open painted doors or painted windows and stuck doors. I mean, we've been through a lot of work together. I should retire, maybe one of these days, I don't know, you know, and make a new one, because I think I'm actually past the hardened steel, you know, because I do an edge quench on these. So, you know, I mean, it's not holding an edge like it used to, which means I'm probably back into softer steel now. But this type of knife right here is where 5160 shines. We just did the video on 1095, and and I said 1095 has got reasonable toughness, but very good edge retention. 5160 is almost exactly the opposite. I find that, I mean, even with a good edge quench, you get reasonable edge retention, but you get insane amounts of toughness, okay? If you need a knife that just flat out will not break, pretty much no matter what you do to it, I mean, within reason, I mean, you can break anything, right? But, you know, with the human hand, putting kind of forces on it, you will not break a knife. 5160 is the way to go. Like I said, this one right here has been through, I mean, there's been occasions where I was prying on it hard enough that it took a set. I just reversed the pry, straightened it back out, and then went and found something, you know, better suited to doing that work. But 5160 is, I mean, so when I did the whole Forged in Fire thing, they wanted us to make a Chinese dowel, and they sent us home with a pretty big stick of W1, inch square stick that was like 36 inches long. I put that in my steel bin and grabbed a piece of 5160 to make the sword out of, because, you know, they shoot those swords with guns, they chop cow bones, you know, they do all kind of crazy stuff to them. 5160 is the steel that you want when you're not too sure what you're gonna be put up against. So 5160 is the classic tough steel. It's tough enough that they use it in leaf springs and coil springs underneath, you know, trucks and heavy duty cars. If it wasn't tough, believe me, it would not stand up to that. 5160 is tough, like capital T-O-U-G-H tough. You can put it through all kind of abuse and it will come out the other end and ask for more. You get reasonable edge retention. Again, I get my 5160 from Jantz and from Admiral. It's been very, very consistent and very repeatable and very few surprises, which is what we need as knife makers. And I use it to make hard use knives, choppers, and swords. I typically won't make paring knives out of 5160. Your size selection on 5160 is generally fairly limited also. You very rarely see it, you know, in sizes much under a 1/4 inch thick. In fact, almost all the stuff that I get, no, I take that back. I've got some in 200 thousandths, which is, what, 5/32 or so? 13/64, somewhere around in there. So 200 thousandths, I've got some in 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch stock. You can also get it in round bar. I don't know if Admiral sells it in round bar, or if Jantz does either, but I seem to remember buying some of it in round bar, and it worked really good. So this one's going to be fairly short because honestly there's not a whole lot more to say about 5160 except for it is just insanely tough. Now it's insanely tough just at a regular straight hardness throughout, okay? So if I was to take this steel right here, or this chopper, and treat the whole thing to a 5960, somewhere around there, it'd be insanely tough. You do an edge quench on it, so that, you know, the edge portion is hard, the center portion is springy, and the back part is soft, then it's, like I said, it's pretty much indestructible. When I did this sword, this is a double-edged sword. So it's, when you do an edge quench on a double-edged sword, it's as much art as it is science, okay? Because it's not like you can heat the whole thing up and then just quench the edge, you know, and harden that edge and then heat the whole thing up, turn it over, and then quench the other edge. That won't work. So pretty much when you're doing a double-edged sword, you do a vertical quench into a vertical quench tank, right? So when you're doing that, what you do is you try to grind the edges as thin as you can, as thin as you can think you can get away with in the heat treat without making warping. Grind the edges thin and then leave the center as thick as you can. Now there's a couple of things you're looking at when you're doing this. So you do your pre-grind like that, and then you heat it up and you try to pull the blade out of the forge when the edges are at non-magnetic or a little bit above, when the edges are at critical, but before the spine has heated up enough to become, you know, so the spine won't be all the way hard, all right? You can do that and then quench the whole thing and then just put it in the oil and leave it there, right? Or if you overshoot your temperatures a little bit too much and that center portion gets to, you know, non-magnetic or, you know, your hardening temperature, then what you do is called an interrupted quench. And you take the whole blade, you drop it down into the oil, you give it a count of like 15 or so, and then you pull it out. And then typically that's when you get the, you know, the flame shooting on it, okay? What's happening there is what you're shooting for is you're shooting to cool down the edges fast enough so that they get hard, but then pulling it out while there's still plenty of heat in the center section so that one, it does not get hard, or two, if it does, then the remaining heat will kind of auto temper, all right? And that's kind of just a brief overview of that, but that's how kind of a quick and dirty way to do, you know, double-edged swords and still have hard edges and soft or springy spines. So again, 5160, it's when you need toughness, that's the steel to go with, and you get okay to good edge retention with it also. Depends on how you heat treat it and how you grind it. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery, and visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.